Hello, hello, blissful parents. Michelle Abraham, your host here today. You guys, let me tell you, I'm so excited for this interview. I've got Krysten Taprell with us today. She's thetherapistparent.com. Well, she's not thetherapistparent.com. Her website is thetherapistparent.com. Krysten is so amazing. Let me just first say hi, and then I'll introduce you more to her. Hi, Krysten. How are you?
Hi, it's good to be here.
Oh, well, we're thrilled that you are here and taking the time out of your schedule to be with us. Guys, let me tell you about Krysten. She's a psychologist with over 20 years experience working with children and families. She worked with many settings, private practice, government agencies, all sorts of things, including working with kids on the autism spectrum, as well as conducting diagnostic assessments, which is really great. So Krysten is also, as I mentioned before, blogs over at thetherapistparent.com. She is also a children's book author. Her book is really cool. It's all about dreams, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes here. But I just wanted to share a little bit more about Krysten. And Krysten, please share a little bit more about all the amazing things you do. I'm not doing you justice at all. Please share with us all the things you do connecting parents. One thing I do want to bring up is that I did see some really amazing things on your website. I was a little bit late to the interview because I was binge looking at all the cool things that Krysten's got on her website, as far as posters and cards and mindfulness things and puzzles and all sorts of cool things for parents and kids. You guys have to go check it out. But first, Krysten, more about you.
Wow, that's kind of a tricky thing to answer after all of that. But yeah, look, I am a psychologist, and like you said, work with kids, and I worked for a government agency, working in schools, so social emotional learning programs. But I started the therapist parent because while I was working in private practice, well, it initially started with my book. So I was seeing lots of kids that have nightmares, and there's a really simple technique that I've used for so long. It's very effective. It works really well. And nightmares is just such a common problem. And I thought it was ridiculous that these poor families had to make appointments to see a psychologist to come for help for nightmares. So that's why I started the book. And then I thought, you know what, going to see a psychologist, and, parents are busy enough running around. There's lots of little tips and tricks that I've learnt just from working for so long with families. So that's why I started the Therapist Parent. So that's why there's a blog with lots of ideas, and so that's where the book came from. And then we know how important gratitude is for mental health, and we find I find even with my kids that it was tricky teaching gratitude, because kids kind of get stuck on, they're grateful for their family, they're grateful for food, they're grateful for friends, and then that's about it. So I created the gratitude cards to help sort of build that skill. And then, it's kind of gone from there. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, you have so many great things, and I just appreciate that you're teaching the gratitude and mindfulness for kids, because I think you can't start that too early. It's so incredible.
Absolutely.
I've seen some amazing changes in my kids, introducing just a few little things here and there. And like I was saying to you before we press record, in our schools have started incorporating it too. So clearly it's really taking a really positive impact on the way kids are able to cope with things, especially in the last few years. Has been a little crazy. Before, yeah, right, to say the least, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
And now you're coming to us all the way from Australia, guys. I didn't even mention that to our audience, but Krysten is in Australia, which is incredible. And so we're glad that you're joining us from the other side of the world. And it's a whole other day over there right now. So
yeah.
Krysten's book is called The Dream Director. So can you tell us a little bit about the book? Obviously, you told us why you created it, from kids having nightmares and stuff. And share a little bit more about the book, please.
Yeah, sure. So the Dream Director is, so the technique that I've always used is just helping kids to change their dreams. So what I would always sort of do is say, a dream is just like a movie in your head. And just like a movie, there's a director, and the director can change the dream. And so you are the director. and so I go through how they can actually change the dream. So I've always taught kids how to, we draw a picture of what their new dream, and if you change it to something funny, your brain doesn't go on the loop of just following that same scary, upsetting dream. It changes it into being able to be something funny, and more often than not, when you're able to change it into something like that, you can go back to sleep and not have the nightmare. So while I was doing this, I actually found someone in the UK, Dr. Justin Haven, and he had a YouTube video of working with people with PTSD and how to change the dreams. I went, hang on, this is the same technique. This is what I've been doing. Right, so I contacted him, and he looked at my book, and he ended up writing the foreword because, it's very similar. So he's done all the research, and he's done his PhD in it, and proven that it's a very effective technique. And so I just do it more with children. He does it more with adults with PTSD.
Oh, that's so awesome. So why do you think kids have nightmares?
Oh, look, we all have dreams because it's our brains processing what's happened through the day. It's our brain trying to make sense of what happened. And as we store memories, so it goes from short-term memory to a long-term memory, that happens in our sleep. So for kids, because they're in their emotional brain so much, in that developed part of the development of their brain, there's lots of emotions in their dreams. So say if they're nervous about starting school, that could come up as like a scary monster in their dream. It's the same emotion, it's the same feeling, it's just the brain's just played it out in a different way.
Oh, that's so cool. And is there a large percentage of kids, do most kids have nightmares growing up, when they're younger?
Yes. Yeah, I would say just about all kids have nightmares at some point. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that they're a problem. And that's why I was like, well, then they don't need to come and see a psychologist for this. This is just a little trick that parents can learn to be able to manage it. I mean, it's quite normal. It's not, if they were having nightmares every night and not able to sleep, and it was interfering with life, well, then that's a different thing. But nightmares are just a normal part of life.
Right. So I feel like my kids had some night terrors. Are those the same as nightmares, or are those a little bit different?
No, they're different. So night terrors is when they're not able to get into REM sleep. So they're not able to just go into the dream, and they're almost half awake in their dream. And so that's really a scary place to be, especially for the parents to see them. Yeah.
I can't wake them up, and it's just like, no. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. Yeah. It didn't happen very often.
Yeah. The trick to that is to try and do some things before sleep to help them get into that REM sleep. So having a sleep routine, having some real relaxation before bed, even having white noise like a fan or something else, just to get them into that sleep, because they're not getting to where they need to go. But we have to dream. That is physiologically, we have to dream. So if they're not getting into REM sleep, they'll still dream, but they're not in the state they need to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then you can't get them out of it, and they're confused when they're in it. And
all days is awful.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's kind of a scary, frightening thing. That's so crazy. Yeah, I love that. We haven't talked about dreams or nightmares at all on this podcast. So I thought this would be a great place for us to start our conversation today. So yeah, any other tips for parents around nightmares that we can help support them with today?
Yeah, look, I think when your child comes into you in the middle of the night and you're half asleep and they're terrified, our first reaction is to don't worry, think about something else, just go back to sleep, and sort of dismiss it. But the problem, and I get it, I've even done it, but we're tired, but the problem is for them, they're in that, they could feel it, they could smell it, their heart is racing, they're in that real state. So first thing we need to do is actually help them to feel calm, because they're not going to be able to think of anything anyway while they're in that state. So we do have to help them calm, and saying things like, just think about something else, that just doesn't work. So if I say to you, don't think about chocolate, you just thought about chocolate. That's not how our brains work. We actually have to change what they were thinking into something else rather than trying to just push it away. So that's why, calm, lots of cuddles, and then go, okay, so what can we change it into? Let's think of something funny that it could be. What could we turn it into? How could you make this different?
Ah, that's great. I love it. Great suggestions, great tips for all of us. I love that. Thanks so much, Kristen, for sharing those with us. I think that will be helpful for a lot of parents. I mean, our parents are mostly school-age kids, but I feel like sometimes those things still happen. Is there a certain age that nightmares are far, they don't happen anymore officially, or is that just depends on the kids?
No, I mean, as you get older, it happens less. You're not, in that emotional state as much, so they're not as intense. But I mean, they still happen as adults. We can still have nightmares, but it's more those development, the not really young, but primary school age kids. There still is an issue. Yeah.
That's awesome. When I was on your website earlier today, I was looking and I noticed the quote that you have on there, and I just want to share it with our parents because I think this quote sums up a lot of the conversations we have on blissful parenting, and I would love to get you to expand on it because I notice a lot of the things that you have on your website. Kristen's got these great posters that you can buy, and are they meant for school? Are they meant for schools or teachers or parents? Anyone can.
Anyone who, yeah. I do the illustrations on my website. That's most of my posts are an illustration that I've done with a quote or a tip or something, and then people were asking if they could download them. So I haven't put all of them up, but some of them are available.
There's some incredible
home or a school or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great reminders on there and so many cool ones to take a look at. But the quote that I was mentioning on your website is either we spend time meeting children's emotional needs by filling up their cup with love, or we spend time dealing with their behaviors caused by unmet needs. Either way, we spend time. And that's a quote by Pam Leo. And I noticed a lot of your posters are around the emotional needs of kids. So can we dive into that a little bit? What are some things that parents need to know to really harness the well-being of our kids, especially after the last crazy couple of years we've had?
Oh, it certainly has been crazy. Yeah, look, I think that the most important thing that we need to get, and it's really hard, so I'm not saying that this is an easy thing, but is to recognize that when our kids are behaving in a certain way that we don't always like, there's a reason for it. And there is always some sort of need behind that behavior. Their behavior is their best way to communicate. Their language is not as well developed as behavior. Behavior was the first thing that was developed. So they're always going to react out of that. And we've got to try and not take it personally, not try and get into our defensive mode and be triggered and go into it and end up butting heads, to take that step back and try and work out what's actually going on. And more often than not, there is some sort of need that could have been fulfilled beforehand that would have prevented that.
Yeah. And so for our parents to kind of be aware of what some of those triggers are, some of those things that happen, we should be on. It's interesting that you say it's not the behavior that's the problem, although that's what we're first to jump to, right? It's this behavior.
Yeah. Because it's it's right in your face. It's a child screaming and throwing themselves on the floor. It's
hard not to pay attention to that. Right?
Yeah. Well, our first reaction often is to just silence that and to try and stop it straight away. And that quite often is because that's what happened when we were kids and we weren't allowed to behave like that. So there's no way our kids should be allowed to behave like that. And that's what the trigger is in that sort of situation. But if we can actually just take a breath and stop, first thing is always calm. Try and calm the child, because there is no negotiating, there is no thinking, there is nothing we can do if they're in that state. So first option is always to try. And if you need to take yourself away and calm first, do that rather than just building it up into being something that will explode. Then when they're calm, they usually can come around. So it could be as simple as you gave them the wrong coloured plate and they've dropped on the floor.
Yeah.
But you can't, in that moment, you can't say, it's the same plate, it's just a different color. Like, they're not going to get that. You have to wait till they're calm. And then you can do lots of cuddles if they need, or if they want it. And then after that, you can talk about, maybe we could have still had that plate, or maybe doesn't, you can actually, and that being able to do that when they're calm actually develops those skills for them. So it helps them to be able to problem solve. It helps them to be able to think through, okay, so yeah, it was just a plate, different color. It's okay. But in the moment, they couldn't do that.
So afterwards, and that they can kind of see, but allowing them to express themselves emotionally like that is, although it's like we want to stop the behavior right there, it's actually better for them. Is that correct? For them to express that fully, because it helps them feel their emotions and understand them.
Yeah, and when we let kids go through their emotions, the brain makes a connection that emotion will end, and then it can change into something else. And that means they don't have to be so reactive. If we shut down emotions all the time, then they never actually go through the emotion. They never actually end that emotion. It's just completely shut down. And in that sense, it can be quite scary, because this huge emotion comes on and they don't know what to do with it. But if we teach them to actually go through and how to manage it, then the wave gets smaller. It's not this big emotional state that we just shut off. It's actually, okay, go through, and then slowly it gets smaller and smaller.
And then how do you explain that to like the other generations in the family that are like, not that's not how we were raised? Like, let them explode like that? Like, are you crazy? They should go to their
they should go to their room by themselves.
Yeah, be quiet, not be seen or heard.
Look, you can try and explain. You can explain this. There's lots of research to show this is really important, that this is how we develop. This is what they need to do. But you're always going to get those people that don't agree with you, and you have to just let that go, because you're not going to agree. You're the parent. This is the way you want to raise your child. You make that decision.
Yeah, it's easier for you to probably negotiate that conversation than keep suppressing the explosive behavior.
Yeah, and you know what? The explosive behavior, it's not going to happen forever.
Right.
Yeah. And if we help them through, they will develop the skills they need.
Mm-hmm. Are there some questions or things that you can ask, like in that calm down period afterwards? Do you go back and say, was that really a great way to like handle yourself during that? Or is that part of that conversation? Or is that conversation, what's the best way to approach that conversation?
So you have to wait till they're ready to talk about it, or they're calm enough to talk about it. But often I would sort of go, oh, that didn't feel good, did it? Like, that was really hard. Yeah. Do you know what could we have done differently, do you think? What could we do next time? Because these things will probably happen again. So what do you think we could try next time? And just sort of go around it that way. So that you're sort of acknowledging, that was big. It felt really, really, really big, and it felt horrible for that moment. So what could we do? And not saying, okay, so that's done. It will happen again. So what are we going to do next time?
Right.
And just getting, the best thing you can do is get the child to try and problem solve themselves. I mean, they're not always going to come up with answers, and you might need to prompt them. But if you can get them to problem solve, then they're coming up with those ideas. They're more likely to do it, but they're also starting to think through it themselves.
That's great. Now, I'm hearing a lot of parents talking about this kind of big emotions happening, like when technology is involved, or when it's time to put technology away. And I can definitely have seen it in my house too. So is there a better way to navigate that conversation to kind of get those waves to get smaller and smaller around technology?
Yeah, look, it depends on the age of the child, obviously, but like younger children, you'll have to have sort of a visual sort of timer or a way that they know that it's time to finish, or they've got until this episode or this game is finished. And you have to be really clear, and you have to stick to your boundaries as well. I mean, people think that sometimes gentle parenting or conscious parenting is, you know, giving in, but it's not. You just understand that when you have your boundary, and you understand that they're upset when that boundary is there. But still have the boundary. For older kids, sort of like primary school age, like I talk to my children about games and technology, and how it's actually not good for their brain to have too much, and they understand that. So just like we only eat junk food sometimes, and we only need to have healthy foods most of the time, they can have screens, but it's not a healthy option. So there's times that we have it and the time that we don't. So we negotiate when is their time, how long they have their time, and they know that that's the boundary of when that is. And then giving warnings is really important. And it's, I mean, I understand that, you know, if they're in the middle of a game, you can't just walk in and turn it off. I mean, if we were scrolling through on our phone and your partner just came and took it off you because you've been on it too long, we wouldn't react well to that either. So, I mean, you do have to give warnings and let them know, and hopefully they can make the decision to turn it off themselves. But if not, you have to help them with that.
Yeah, that's a great point to really like kind of reiterate the healthy, not healthy is not great for your brain so much of it, and get them to kind of notice how they're feeling. They've been on it too long, or like not feeling well, or if they if they tell you the truth around that, right? No, I feel fine. It was great.
Or you could pick up, so quite often, if they're playing lots of video games, they can, because it's such an adrenaline boost, and you know there's lots of brain chemicals happening, and that's why it's addictive. You can sort of say, look, I've noticed after you play, you kind of a bit more aggressive, or you kind of fighting with your brother a lot more. Do you notice that? And then you go, you know, I really think that's from having too much of these games. That's why we've got to cut it back a little bit. And if you get them to notice that these are the things that are going on, it kind of makes sense.
That totally makes sense.
You're not just this mean parent that won't let them do it.
Yeah. You're still sometimes always the mean parent that doesn't let them. That's just part of the job.
Reason for it.
Exactly. That's just part of the job. Awesome. Well, I just love this conversation today. It's been really great. Is there anything like before we let you go? Because I know life is busy. You have 3 kids of your own in the other room right now waiting for you. So, and time is so important with them. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but any last words for parents, any bit of advice that you've seen that's been really helpful in your practice and in your work?
Yeah, look, I think at the moment, with the world being as crazy as it is, everybody's anxiety levels are really high. So I think it's important to recognise that as parents, ours are probably quite high, and then our children's will be as well. And, you know, going back to school with COVID the way it is and all of that. So I think it's just important to recognise that we're all finding things a bit tricky at the moment. So maybe sort of, you know, focusing on doing some relaxation, or just being aware of where your body is and what we can do to calm and to get through.
Awesome. I love that. What's your favorite calm down technique for kids?
Well, my favorite is actually why I made the puzzle that I have, but it's the breathing where you trace your hand.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So the puzzle that I did is a hand that you trace, but I also have little discs that go inside where you can put a visualization. So like the beach or a river or somewhere that's calming, and then you use your 5 senses as you go through of how you feel. But just as a breathing technique, just doing the finger one, because it actually feels really good, as well as slowing the breathing down.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Cool. Well, Blissful Parents, there you have it. Really cool technique. And if you want to check it out, what she's got the puzzle for it too, which is really neat. I was looking at it today too. It's a mindfulness and gratitude puzzle that's on Krystens' website, which you can find thetherapistparent.com, which is super cool. So make sure you go and check it out there. And oh, don't forget to check out the downloads and the posters and things like that. There's so many cool things you have, and the Dream Director book. So just go to Krystens' website. You'll be lost there for hours. Lots of cool things there. Thank you so much, Kristen, for spending your time with us today.
Thank you.
It's been great. We're so glad to have had you. So thank you so much. Blissful parents out there, please go out there and have a wonderful week. Be blissful, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.